Welcome to the AlphaWarrior Show. We're excited to share diverse perspectives and expert insights with you. Please note that the views and information expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the AlphaWarrior Show, its management, or our partners. Each of our affiliates and sponsors and partnerships is a separate entity, and their opinions are their own. Today's content is provided for information and educational purposes and should not be taken as specific advice, whether it be financial, medical, or legal. While we strive to present accurate and useful information, we cannot guarantee its completeness or relevance to your specific situation. We provide all information as is and encourage you to consult with a professional advisor to address your specific individual needs. Your use of any information from this broadcast is entirely at your own risk. By listening further, you agree to identify and protect the AlphaWarrior Show and its associates from any claims or damages arising from your use of this broadcast content. Changes to this disclaimer may be made at any time and will be done effectively immediately upon posting or broadcasting. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you find the episode both informative and thought-provoking. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the next generation of warfare, psychological warfare. In modern conflict, the mind is a potent weapon. Discover General Michael T. Flynn's groundbreaking guide, The Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. Unlock tactics, strategies, and the mindset to navigate this cognitive battlefield that we all find ourselves in. Equip yourself against manipulation and emerge unscathed. Unleash your potential. Order now.
You smiling? Because I'm smiling. A week of lives. Monday live, Tuesday live, Wednesday, Operation Gladio night live. I miss this. I miss this a lot. Welcome to the AlphaWarrior Show, you guys. I am your host, Alpha. It is Wednesday. Yes, that means we're doing Operation Gladio night with the Colonel from the Colonel's Corner. So all those links are down in the description. A lot going on the last 2 weeks, and we are not done talking about what they try to do to President Trump on Saturday, July the 13th. So what was before the OSS and CIA? They're supposed to be doing operations in the United States. We're going to talk about it tonight. But before we do that, I got to keep these lights on, and I definitely got to keep this air conditioner on. So let's get to some amazing sponsors. And then after that, we're commercial free through this content all the way to the end. If you guys do drop Rumble rants, depending on the speed of the show, I might save them for the end of the show, or maybe I get to them during the show. So if I'm not doing it during the show, don't panic. I will get to them at the end of the show, I promise. So let's get to some amazing sponsors, and then when I be back, it's time to unwrap some stuff.
Are you worried about the effects that higher inflation rates will have on your investments? Are you trying to secure your retirement savings against losses, but you notice that inflation is a hot topic these days? But how dangerous are low inflation rates on your retirement savings? An inflation rate of 2% may not seem like much, but it means that prices will just about quintuple over the lifetime of the average American. And 4% average inflation rate means that something that costs $1 when they're born will cost $23 when they die. That demonstrates the danger of even low inflation rates. So when it comes to gold and inflation rates, many investors want to know whether inflation rates have an effect on gold prices. What history indicates is that over the long term, increased inflation should lead to correspondingly higher gold prices. From September 1971 to August 2020, gold grew 7.5 times as much as inflation. Not only can an investment in physical gold help protect your assets against the damage done by inflation, it can also help grow the value of your retirement portfolio over the long term. If you're looking to protect your retirement assets, why wait until stock markets crash and gold begins to rise in price?
Science proves that a healthy immune system is the body's first defense against the smallest of ailments to the most catastrophic. Coriolus versicolor is the most sought-after, all-natural supplement for both humans and pets to help boost the immune system. There are over 400 studies worldwide on its effectiveness in humans, including Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, MD Anderson Cancer Center, and now from the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine. Together, we can help reverse this terrible tide now plaguing your loved ones and give them the immune-boosting supplements that they need.
All right, there you guys have it. All the links to all the sponsors in this show, including my special guest tonight, my friend Colonel, are down in the description. So if you guys want to and you haven't, go check that stuff out. Let me bring on the magnificent Colonel. How are you doing, ma'am?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I actually got sleep the last couple nights.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's like a Christmas present to myself. Like, no, I didn't do nothing fun. I didn't buy anything cool. I got some sleep. So, but Colonel, you got some feedback from the last show. You want to touch on that a little bit?
So, lots of great feedback, actually. And I find it interesting that a lot of the observations that we made, especially our little roof of my piece of paper here, I still have the fold in it. How do you see me? So we had very little information when we did our show. And it's amazing how what our observations were during that show has played out in real time. So obviously the breaking news right now is the guy's located well back from the crest of the building. And so our observation was that there's no way that if the guy's crawling up to the crest of the building, the ridge line, that, by the time he gets up over it to be able to see down and get his rifle up, his head and his chest is well above the ridge line. Only to find out, and you and I said that's just not even plausible. So there's no way that snipers looking in his direction are going to allow not only his entire top of his body plus the rifle and not take a shot. No way. There's no ROEs that allow that, nothing. So that was not plausible at all. Only to find out today, late breaking news, is he's located like halfway down from the ridge line to the edge of the roof, which means he was nowhere. And we've already decided this ain't happening. So there's no way this is happening. So I'm still going with the theory that there was somebody behind him. And as we have decided in Operation Gladio repeatedly, the pattern is that they get these patsies thinking they're in a training mode, right? That this guy has worked with the FBI through some arrangement. And whether it's the hunt club or the hunting location that he's at, where the range, whatever, that there's people around him that have engaged him into, hey, we're going to run a scenario. And hey, you're our buddy. So how would you like to participate in a training exercise as it relates to the Trump rally? We're going to have you do some recon for us, and we want you to try to get through our security. And here's how we want you to do it. And they will lay the scenario out for him. He does the scenario. Can you make it from the front gate to the building? Can you make it from the building to the roof? So as he's doing all of these things, either with interaction, the things that are on him, he had his cell phone. Was he talking to someone? Is that the reason why they can't get access to the cell phone? All of those things. And so he gets halfway up that roof. They're ready to take their shot at Trump. They take their shot at him first, and then Trump. So he's out, and then they pretend like they've done a counter shot back at him from one of those sniper teams, when in fact they may or not have ever even fired a shot. Because I do still think because I've never seen the shot from the other side. I saw for the first time a picture today, like from behind the stage, like a drone shot, where there's literally nothing on the left-hand side of Trump and everything on the right-hand side. So it doesn't seem like there could have been snipers coming in from that side. There definitely could have been, as we pointed out, snipers from behind him and under him. So it does look like whoever was behind him took a shot at him.
And the body worn camera footage, well, the body worn camera footage, I'll do air quotes for those that are listening and not watching, that Chuck Grassley released from his office in their FOIA request, it shows that far building back to that 2-story one.
Yeah.
And it just reaffirms that. I'm like,
what if we said, right?
Mm-hmm. I'm like, man, that's just the line of sight on that is perfect.
Correct.
For something like that.
Yeah.
So,
and it would have allowed them to take him out. And remember what we said about the way the blood was draining from his face. It does not look like he was shot from the front. It looks like he was shot from the back because of the way the blood is coming around the front of his face. So,
a lot of funny business.
Well,
funny business.
And understand that I think is why it's so critical that we understand what Operation Gladio is, because the taking out of the prime minister in Sweden, the taking out of multiple different people, the Boston Marathon bombing, the 9/11, all done in conjunction with training exercises. So when you understand the patterns of how these things operate, you look for completely different things, because number one, the story they told you is not true. And then you start asking different questions, because no one that knows anything about Operation Gladio, the very first question you would have asked anybody in the local area, whether it was the police or any of the others, has there been any training exercises going on in the local area at all? At any level. You talk to every level, whether it's the ATF, the DEA, whatever, because all of those could have been at work here because they're all infiltrated with the CIA type agents.
And I know people are thinking, but how is that possible? How would someone not realize that they're in some fake training exercise? Listen, I think back to when we were doing training for the explosive canines. Like, people didn't realize we're not going into fake areas like, like a Hogan's Alley. No, we go to real malls in America. We go to theater lobbies, because we need to make sure that these dogs in a real scenario
can operate around people.
100%.
Yeah.
So what if, and guess what? I'm going in there, and because I know I'm part of this, training exercise,
you could have been the patsy.
I could have been the patsy. And surveillance cameras, what are they going to do? Awkward behavior. Because what am I doing? I'm trying to put myself in a position where it's going to challenge the dog, and I'm monitoring. So, you know, to someone that doesn't know it's a training exercise, they're going to be like, oh, yeah, that guy, that's suspicious. Oh, look what he's doing. Like, and all of a sudden, I get smoked, right? And what do you hear? Veteran, former law enforcement officer brings this into a movie theater, MAGA extremist. And then everybody are like, yeah, man, freaking Alpha finally lost it. He went off the deep end. It's like, no,
So,
he was in a
all
training
right.
exercise.
So let's add the part where we just found out about the tracking of the cell phones to all those different locations, including the co-located FBI building in Washington, D.C. Do you think there's any possibility that he was taken to any of those locations on a training exercise?
Absolutely. Because that's what we saw happen in the Gretchen Whitmire case.
Exactly. So
it's not scripted, you guys. It's not scripted.
it is not. I've not even talked to Alpha since last Wednesday. And that's the kind of stuff that I can't tell you, Alpha, how excited I get now that you're like, because there's so few people that understand Operation Gladio at my level. And having conversations with other people that understand it, even at something that's less than my level, but like a middle of the road level, and not someone who's just brand new to it, allows you to think outside the box, but in the box of Gladio. And so it's truly amazing that the preparation that it has done, and we're sitting here in the middle of history, and we're able to look at it completely different because we did our homework.
Imagine how much history we've studied that's been modified. Like, so what are the real stories? Like, who were really the bad guys?
All right.
Who are really the good guys? And here's the thing: as Americans, do we want to know the answers?
Yes, we do.
Absolutely. Even when the truth is painful, the truth is the truth. I do want to take a brief interruption because I learned something just a few days ago. So thank you, Chickaboom, who just became a monthly supporter. I was not aware of this, Colonel. So, and I don't know if you are, but Rumble resets it every year. So if you were a monthly supporter before, Rumble does this thing where it just resets everybody, and you're no longer a supporter until you become a supporter again. So for those that are wondering, you're like, oh, I've been a supporter. Ask you, go check the Colonel's channel, check my corner, because Rumble has this, I'm going to say, a really dumb policy. It's like, man, let people decide if they don't want to be a supporter no more, Rumble. But I guess, protecting the audience, and I understand that too. But I just give it back to you.
It's weird because Substack doesn't do that. Substack leaves you until
you cancel.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, I have my own opinion of Rumble. I'm glad it's there, but it does have some interesting aspects to it.
I'll tell you this, Colonel, to go on a segue, but you're working with the Marine here, and you know the way our brains work, squirrel, we get excited. Criado.media, you guys, it's a platform that's out there that is everything that we ever want to do. Not controlled by big tech, not controlled by, Israeli intelligence or any intelligence for that matter. It's American guys that are looking at American infrastructure where nobody can be influenced, and where content creators, artists, singers, all these people can actually reap the benefit of the work they do. For even like people that sing, that sell million albums and literally see like 2 cents, 3 cents on the dollar. This is a way of bringing, the artists. It's Criado.media. And I've actually developed a friendship with those guys, and they have the brain power. They're a bunch of nerds that are in there, and I mean that in the compliment way. They got a bunch of nerdy tech guys, but they also got some guys that understand the system, been doing that kind of work for a long time. They just need help, getting the push behind them. But it would be nice to see a platform out there that is really about uncensorship, not just freedom of speech, but freedom of reach. It'd be nice to see that, because a legitimate platform like that would challenge all the other platforms to either be honest or go bankrupt.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
the future.
Yes. Bright.
100%.
All right. So I'm going to do a little bit of history, and then we're going to jump in to something that I discovered. And Alpha, I have to tell you this. There are certain, so I'm doing an hour show every day that just moved to 4 p.m. And it had been at noon. And I'm trying to go across the globe. And then I do Monday night in the Frog Pond. But I have to tell you, and I know some of those people will be watching, I do like to save the best for Wednesday night. Of the things that I find, to bring them here. And that's kind of in exchange for the opportunity that you gave me and the audience that it created, which is where we're at today. So this to me I've seen a lot of crazy, boiling people in acid and overthrowing governments. That's pretty crazy. This to me was, and I don't know how other people view it, but the implications of this is huge. And I hope everybody understands that. And by the way, when I take a drink of water, I want people to understand it looks like a bottle of wine, but it's water. We went to a really fancy restaurant and got what they call flat water at the Italian restaurant. And it was way too expensive to leave the bottle and the water in it. So when we went to my daughter's birthday like 2 days ago, and so I just grabbed it out of the refrigerator, and I don't want people think, damn, is she drinking wine out of a bottle? So just letting you know,
I'm just saying, Colonel. I'm only a couple feet away from the little fridge. If we want to turn it into a party, like, I'm all about that. I ain't judging.
It's just water.
Tune in, everybody. Alpha and the Colonel are getting sloshed tonight.
Well, I do have my daughter, who's like, her delivery date was today. She's 9 months pregnant. We just got back from dinner, and she's still waiting to see her mom drunk for the first time. So I don't want to do that on camera.
That is awesome. I got some good news for you.
What?
I got a message today from one of the audience members that watches our Operation Gladio series. And she says, Alpha, I was watching Viva Fry's show. So this was yesterday, but I just read it today. And somebody in the chat mentioned something, and he goes, what's Operation Gladio?
Do you know who that was?
No.
Liza.
What?
My researcher. Yeah, she was in his chat. She told me this morning she did that.
Yes. So I saw the message. I have his cell phone. So guess what text I'm going to be sending him? You want to know Operation Gladio Viva? This is the number to call and bring her on. You know how big that is? Like, the audience there to hear that? Like, oh my goodness.
I actually don't, but I'm up for it.
I want to say a low-end episode for him is probably like 100,000.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
So
no better time.
100%. So I was just like, heck yeah. I didn't know that was Liza.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. You need to give them my cell phone number so they could just shoot me a text.
Yeah.
I trust the team.
Cool. All right.
Here we go. Business. I'm just excited.
All right. So, this is going to be a scavenger hunt for us. Okay. So just a little bit of refresher. Teddy Roosevelt, obviously related to, and a former president, FDR. So during the time that he was president, and he had a whole bunch of different jobs as far as the government is concerned, understand that he came to become president. How? Through an assassination of McKinley. Okay. So I find that strikingly interesting. And he was the president and or in a role in the Navy and the military during the Spanish-American War and a whole bunch of other stuff. He served as the New York governor, and he ran with the McKinley Roosevelt ticket in 1900. So he's a progressive. He had the square deal where FDR had the New Deal. Same kind of big government garbage. He also was big in the quote unquote conservation, which we now know is a buzzword, kind of like the anti-communist is the Gladio buzzword. Conservation for these guys was a buzzword for colonizing and scarfing up scarce resources under this conservation. And that's what the World Wildlife Fund was all about, is they take your shit under the auspices of green or conservation. All over the world, they do this through the World Wildlife Fund, the 1001 Club, all kinds of venues. So he is also the one that was in charge when originally Congress passed a law that said we were going to build the canal that went across Central America in Nicaragua, not in Panama. Panama was not even considered because Panama was a state within Colombia. And Colombia wanted a shitload of money, and we didn't want to pay it. So we passed a bill that said we were going to build the Nicaraguan canal. But these people, to include Teddy Roosevelt and Sullivan and Cromwell, the famous law firm where John Foster Dulles and Allen Dulles came from, and the law firm for the International Syndicate back in the day, had some people they represented that owned some swampland in Panama that they wanted to offload. And I mean, I'm almost not joking here. And so they got a PR firm in New York to issue stamps for Nicaragua to include a volcano on it, and mailed the stamp to all the senators. And then made the allegation that this volcano was next to where they were proposing to put the canal, and it was going to forever endanger the canal, and that was a bad idea. So that gave them then the new entrance to introduce the Panama proposal and stage a coup for them to steal Panama. And what they did was they invaded Panama, planted a flag, and said there's been an insurrection and they're succeeding from Colombia. And immediately the State Department recognizes the new government, blah, blah, blah. So Panama is made out of, I mean, it was a fake country. It was part of Colombia. And then, of course, they immediately start digging the Panama Canal with this stolen country. And they avoid paying millions of dollars to Colombia for purchasing the property that they just stole. All right. So all of this happens under Teddy Roosevelt. So he's the big expansionist. He's the one that sent in the troops to, when we took property in the Spanish-American War, Puerto Rico, Cuba, and the Philippines, and instead of freeing the people, we recolonized them. So they had been fighting for decades, the Spanish, to get them off their islands. And instead of us being the rescuers and the freedom people that we purport ourselves to be, we just basically went and reoccupied them and stole all their shit too. So this is Teddy Roosevelt. I have to tell you all this stuff so that you know who this guy is. All right. So during this time, there was a thing that was set up called Citizens Military Training Camp. CMTC, Citizens Military Training Camp. And I'm like, wow, that almost sounds like Gladio. What the hell is that? And I got to looking at it, and it said that there was some early in the 1900s, and I'm going to get to the precursor to this in a minute, there was an idea that we were going to set up these summer training camps, and it wasn't just for, you know, farm boys to learn how to shoot, because of course they already knew how to shoot. This was for the elitist among the lawyers and the government and these people, because initially in the first several years you had to pay your way into this program, and it was very selective. And then basically it was 30 days for 3 consecutive summers at a minimum. And they were basically going to put you through a boot camp type thing. And so the interesting thing that I found is it was part of a thing called the preparedness movement. And the preparedness movement, which we're going to get to in just a second, actually was set up before we went to World War I. Well, why would you be training people to be soldiers when you're not going to war?
Because you know one's coming.
Okay, very good answer. All right, so I also found this interesting because I told you how this story keeps weaving into my life. Last year, for some crazy reason, I had not done this until last summer. We go on a long summer trip every year, except for this year because my daughter's pregnant. But last year we were doing the Northeast, and there is a base up there that I'd always wanted to visit because a lot of my friends got stationed there, and it was called Plattsburgh. And I was at a SAC base that had 135s, and Plattsburgh was a Strategic Air Command base as well. And so a lot of my friends had been stationed there that I eventually got stationed with. And I had heard how cool it was. It's got the brownstone brick buildings. It was an Army Air Corps. It was built in the 1930s. It's very historic, beautiful. Like the buildings that were, or the bases that were built in the 1950s are all aluminum shit cans. But these old Army Air Corps buildings are amazing, like historic museum quality, amazing. So I wanted to go to Plattsburgh. And so we camped in an RV park. Like, I mean, we don't camp, we glamp, but whatever. A few minutes outside of Plattsburgh. And we spent like 2 or 3 days in the town, driving around, going to bars, going to restaurants and stuff like that. And I walked all over Plattsburgh Air Force Base. You could see, as you all know, you know what the chapel on a base looks like. You know what the command building would have looked like across from the flagpole, the parade field, and then the commander's house is on the other side. So yeah, so you could, and that's all still there. The old VOQ is still there. They turned it into a rec building where they've got all kinds of venues and stuff. It's just a really cool thing, and they've really done a really neat job. And the rest of the town looks like crap, but this base looks amazing. So I was just like flabbergasted when I'm reading down here, and I'm going, oh shit, that was where the headquarters for this whole thing was Plattsburgh Air Base. And I'm like, well, that's totally crazy. So I just clicked on preparedness movement. And I'm like, what is that? Again, something else about our history that I've never heard of. And I'm a history buff. So I'm just like flabbergasted. Okay. So have you ever heard of Fort Leonard Wood?
No,
Kansas?
that doesn't something. No.
Okay. It's an Army base, and it's a very infamous Army base. And obviously I know that most military bases are named after people, but I had never looked into Leonard Wood. Well, let's look into Leonard Wood. Leonard Wood, Wood. Well, it just so happens that Leonard Wood, oh, dang, he's a doctor. And oh, dang, he actually got appointed to be in charge of Cuba when we were there recolonizing it and killing all the Cubans. And I'm like, well, oh, crap. He got to be the governor of the Philippines after he was the governor of Cuba, where we did the exact same thing. And I'm like, well, shoot. This guy's like Gladio before Gladio was Gladio, right? And so I'm starting to look down through, oh, he went to Harvard Medical School. And, oh, the Battle of San Juan Hill, Puerto Rico, or Cuba. And so all of, I'm just like flabbergasted. I just keep reading and reading, and he's in the middle of all of this stuff. Well, then I get down and I start looking at, oh, he's in like the Mayflower Society and the General Society of Colonial Wars, and kind of all of these like hobnob organizations, to include, you know, having went to Harvard, blah, blah, blah. So he's your typical international syndicate guy. He's going to fit right in to the whole Operation Gladio, everything. So going back to this preparedness movement, he and Teddy Roosevelt, the guy that's all about colonializing not just the islands, but also Latin America, the two of them are the ones that create the preparedness movement, which led to this citizens military training camp. Okay, so that's kind of the progression of this. And I want to read a little bit about this training camp. So they have a red course, a white course, and a blue course. That's year 1, 2, and 3. The red course is made up of like what you and I would think of as basic training, just like how to salute, how to march, that type thing. The white course is tactics, marksmanship. That's year 2. The blue course is advanced leadership, officership, and kind of like strategic planning kind of stuff. That's year 3. And then basically you're a graduate and you can serve as a commissioned officer when the need arises. But otherwise you're kind of in this like clique of organized reserve officers that balloons at one point to over 40,000 people that they have sent through this course. So this isn't a small thing. This isn't something that we should not know as far as military history. This is a big freaking deal. Among the participants in this program, Harry S. Truman, Ronald Reagan, Robert Penn Warren, who basically was in media, Robert McElhenney, who's the maker of Tabasco sauce. He's the guy that founded that. And Chuck Yeager, John McCloy, which is a name that comes up in Operation Gladio multiple times. And why is that? Because he was the Assistant Secretary of War during World War II. He was involved in the North African campaign. He was advocating for the bombing of the Japanese cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He becomes the president of the World Bank. He is the commissioner for Germany. He becomes the chairman of Chase Manhattan, chairman of the CFR. So you get, and he's a member of the Warren Commission, the cover-up of JFK's assassination. And he's advisors to every president from FDR to Ronald Reagan. This is where, and he was a member of what was referred to as the wise men, which was basically the guys that backed up the whole NATO, Marshall Plan, everything. Other people in that group was Robert Lovett, George Kennan, Averell Harriman from the Brown Harriman Bank. Let's see, and Dean Atkinson, who was the Secretary of State. So these are big name people that all were part of this whole ball of wax. So this is not an insignificant group of people that they're sending through this. And as I started reading these people's names and these people's backgrounds in all of this, I'm like, shit, that sounds like the OSS. Because the OSS was a collection of Wall Street bankers, lawyers, acting and playing as spies, like the Paul Helliwells, the Dulles brothers, all of those people, all part of the OSS, Siglib, all of that stuff. And
you got to let me interrupt with a thought.
Go ahead.
So back then it was, like you said, the bankers and them that were pretending. I wonder if today's pretenders are doctors, influencers, radio content creators. I'm just saying, Colonel. I'm just saying, I've seen a lot of funny business.
I think that's absolutely true. So, these bases, I saw you had the map up earlier. So
yeah, I'll bring that back up.
Some of these bases, like Fort Benjamin Harris in Indianapolis, was used. Camp Edwin Glenn, which was on Fort Benjamin Harris. So that's kind of hard to see, but you can tell where all of these they had it divided up into 9 sectors, kind of like FEMA. Kind of like FEMA. And they have all of the different dots on there is where they did the training at. So kind of like FEMA.
And for the record, this is one of their posters.
Yes, it's Citizens Military Training Camp. Oh, and let me tell you the funny story. Do you know where that came from?
No.
Pritzker's Military Museum. Do you know who Pritzkers are?
I've heard it. I'm trying to put it in my brain right now.
Governor Pritzker of Illinois. His family's mafia.
Oh my goodness. I know what you're talking about.
Pritzker and Pritzker, the law firm in Chicago, was basically the mafia law firm that gave birth, and they bought the hotels and they set up J.D. Pritzker and Penny and all of the current level Pritzkers all came from this law firm, which was exactly like Sullivan and Cromwell.
Isn't that the one that has the conspiracy theory that they're the ones that grew Obama? Like they're behind that?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I know what you're talking about now. I'm gonna look for that article too.
So I'm looking at this map, and I just on the website, I'm like, Pritzker's Military Museum. What? Yeah, because this would be Pritzker family would be the people that would attend this. That it was of that caliber. And the Pritzkers, of course, made money running drugs. They made money running alcohol. Blah blah blah. All right. So all of this is starting, to fit into what I look for confirmation that I am in fact looking at an Operation Gladio event. So one of the other things that came up was, let me see where I found it. Hold on just a second. So there was one other thing in here that I wanted to bring up with the preparedness movement. I'm not finding it, but I found this. This is a manual that was used, and it's called Neutrality and Preparedness. And basically, it's a narrative that talks about how we are going to be neutral leading up into World War I, but we are going to basically have these militia trained people. And listen to what this says. In 1915, a preparedness movement began in the United States led by Theodore Roosevelt and Army Chief of Staff Leonard Wood. They argued that the U.S. needed to build up its military order in order to defend itself, and they advocated for universal military training. They couldn't get past compulsory service, which is what they did in Europe. So this is what their alternative was to compulsory service. The opposition from socialist pacifists and anti-militarists, in addition, President Wilson, who insisted that the United States needed to remain neutral. However, with the spread of English propaganda about German atrocities in Belgium and the sinking of the Lusitania by the German submarine, which, by the way, was a false flag Gladio event, on May 1915, support for the preparedness increased on campuses and nationally. In April, a book was released that talked about promoting preparedness. And this is out of the book. Under the presidency of Colombia, the Collegiate Anti-Militarism League has been formed to fight efforts at many colleges to stir up a dangerous militarist spirit and to prevent, if possible, the introduction of compulsory military training of college men. The League says it must not train our college men to fight. We must not plan to increase the Army or Navy. It says these efforts indicate the growth of a dangerous militarist propaganda, which will render futile our stand for peace and disarmament. If the League were to drop half of its program, it would double its efficiency. Let it advocate voluntary training of college men, fight the movement to introduce compulsory training, but to advocate disarmament and a reduction in our military and our Navy. Universal disarmament is yet little more than a utopian dream, a distant goal. The nation's protests against breaches of neutrality are vaporizing. There is no power to enforce them at the command of this country. Look at the pitiful condition of our coastal defenses. Not enough ammunition to last them 2 hours. It is said in the Army circles. Look at the guys that actually want the money and the power. Look at the dilapidation of our submarines, only one in a reserve fleet capable of going to sea. The guns are short range, the torpedoes are old, and the winter practice of the fleet is inappropriate. The Army was not or has not 80,000 available men for home defense. What is a raw militia against the trained product of Europe? An army is not made in a day. We need not to go to war, but we must have some means of defending ourselves. So at the same time that this kind of war footing, if you will, is going on, this is the kind of conversation and the documents and the movements that had began. And they talk about meetings like at YMCAs in order to use those organizations as the impetus to begin building this fleet or this group.
Well, as everybody digests that, I went and found the article. I freaking had to subscribe to the New York Times to pull it out. So that sucks. Damn it, New York Times got $4 out of me. But it's important because I wanted people to see what I was talking about. So this is from July 15th of 2012 from the New York Times. Leading role in Obama 08, but backstage in 12. And I'll just read the first sentence. At first glance, the party that Penny Pritzker hosted last month in Chicago could have passed for an Obama reunion. And I'll drop the link to that if you guys want to have to give New York Times your money, damn it, to read that article. But that's crazy, Colonel.
Yeah.
Because if they bred this dude, if the conspiracies are true, and we're starting to run out of conspiracies here, and they help get this guy to where he's at, and then they have these connections here, are they still at it?
Oh, absolutely.
Is this one of those names? Because I always tell people, if we know their names, we haven't figured it out. Is this one of those names that's behind the curtain? That's behind the curtain.
Yes.
I mean, and listening to these connections, it sure as hell sounds like it.
Yes. Yeah. So, let me get down to the Democrat Party saw the preparedness movement as a threat. Roosevelt, Root, and Wood Now, Root, let me find his first name. He was a big deal back in the day. He was in with the bankers, and trying to find his first name. Elihu, Eliho Root. Now, he worked with Teddy Roosevelt and Henry Stimson, and Stimson is a lawyer, Republican Party guy, but he also served in he's a classic uniparty. He was in Democrat and Republican administrations. He served as the Secretary of War. He worked for Teddy Roosevelt. He too served as the governor of the Philippines after we conquered them. He was part of the, he had dealings with the Manhattan Project. He was part of a whole bunch of different things. So the fact that he's in here, he joined the Council of Foreign Relations, all of the typical. And Elihu Root is a guy that I come across repeatedly when we get back into the older creations of Operation Gladio roots, because he's a Carnegie Endowment for International Peace guy. He also was an administrator of the Spanish-American War colonial possessions. He was part of the set up part of the Philippine Organic Act that basically made it our colonial possession. So he was he worked with Henry Cabot Lodge, which was another big guy back in the day. He was part of the Kennedy administration. So again, these are all the same people. He worked with Pillsbury, blah, blah, blah. So this is the caliber of people that are involved in this. But what this says is that General Leonard Wood and ex-President Teddy Roosevelt and former Secretaries of War Elihu Root and Henry Stimson were the driving force behind the preparedness movement, along with many nations, the nation's most prominent bankers, industrialists, lawyers, and prominent families, the International Syndicate. There emerged an Atlantist foreign policy establishment, i.e. the future NATO, a group of influential Americans drawn primarily from the upper class lawyers, bankers, academics, politicians, committed to the Anglophile internationalism. So Paul Cravath, one of the New York's foremost corporate lawyers on the caliber of Sullivan and Cromwell, in his mid-50s, when the war began, the conflict served as an epiphany, sparking his interest in international affairs. And basically, he strongly supported intervention in the war because, again, these guys are going to make money off of the war. So then it talks a little bit about the opposition to it and how the Democrat Party saw the whole movement as a threat because it was going to embroil the United States into basically a forever war scenario. And they didn't like that at all. So,
did you find us the guys that created Gladio? Is that what I'm hearing here?
I do think I did. I think
this is crazy, Colonel.
Yeah, I know. I know. That's what I thought. Because most of the people that that I have read their books on Gladio traces Gladio back to the British Round Table crowd in the late 1800s, but they don't pick up the United States involvement in it until after World War II. Right?
Right.
But if you do the parallel to the late 1800s, the 1890, the 1901, the Balfour Agreement, and all of that other stuff, as you're going through the fielding of the Bolsheviks in Russia, like in the 1905 time frame, that's the exact same time frame this stuff starts. So we now have a parallel track of what they're doing there, and it actually happening inside the United States as well. And I mean, you and I know what it would take to set up an entire military structure under a quote unquote peacetime. Do you know how much money? Everything about this is screaming Operation Gladio pre-OSS, elitist. And I read, and I was trying to find it. I don't see it. I had a handbook up, and now for some reason it's escaping me.
Well,
But
and just so people can understand, like the volume of money we're talking here, it's not just the money that's on the books, but it's the money that's spent off the books, whether it's assassinations, whether it's bribery, whether it's these black ops that are taking place. And I would argue that it's probably just as much that's on the books. Like there's a lot that goes into kind of orchestrating that kind of thing. It could, because you do have good people that when they realize what's going on, they're going to be resistance and they need to be dealt with.
Okay, I found it. All right. So this is the handbook. Let me send you this link real quick because we need to put this out. Everybody needs to look at this. This is crazy, crazy crap. I thought I had lost it. It was hiding. So I'm going to send it to you real quick. This handbook blew my socks off. So it's called the 22nd Infantry at Camp McClellan, 1924. It's part one of the CMTC, the civilian training camps, the civilian military training camps. So here's what it says, because they got to see these pictures. These pictures are crazy, because what you have to realize is these are civilians, bakers and lawyers out on parade fields learning how to march. They're learning how to fire guns. This is crazy shit. All right. So military training camps for civilians to promote good citizenship and national defense were established just prior to World War I, which I think is indicative of them knowing we were going to the war. Participation in this early training was entirely voluntary. In 1913, under the direction of Major General Leonard Wood, 2 vacation camps were held for students from educational institutions, one in Monterey, California, and the other in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. The men who attended these camps paid their own expenses. Yeah, guys, watch these pictures of this, because this is crazy, crazy crap. All right. The 4 camps were held the following year. In his address to Congress that year, President Woodrow Wilson said, "We must depend on in every time of national peril, in the future as in the past, not upon the standing army, nor yet upon a reserve army, but upon citizenry trained and accustomed to arms. We should encourage such training and make it a means of discipline for our young men." In 1915, 5 camps were held. The graduates of these camps formed the Military Training Camps Association. So now they got a club. Each, helped to insert Section 54 in the National Defense Act in June 1916, authorizing voluntary summer camps, with now the government paying for it. You know, those free things that become a non-free thing at the taxpayer's expense. Under the provision, 12 camps were held in 1916, with the U.S. entry into World War I in 1917. You cannot tell me these people did not know we were going to war.
100%. 100%.
These camps were turned into officer training camps for the duration of the war. 1920, Secretary of War John Weeks approved the permanent establishment of voluntary training camps and directed the War Department to include such in the annual budget. The first camps were opened in 1921 under this provision and trained 11,000 men. Applications in 1921 were 4 times greater than the capacity of the camps. In 1922, training was given 20,000, then 25, and then in 1924, it exceeded 30,000 men being trained in these camps. The primary aim was to promote good citizenship, health, physical, mental, and moral values. Instructions were given and it says here that there was 4 years now that it expanded to 4. So now they have a basic and a red, white, and blue. Each course lasted approximately 1 month on successive summers. Young men were admitted as early as 17 and as late as 24. Government paid for all expenses, including transportation, uniforms, food, quarters, and medical care. And there was no service obligation. You just showed up after you were selected, learned how to drill. You went through special training. There was athletics, blah, blah, blah. Every effort was made to instill a devotion to country, civic responsibility, blah, blah, blah. So let me move on to the next page. This is what I found very interesting. There's a shield. Did you go to the next page? Did you see the shield?
Yeah, the one with the arrows in the sun?
Yeah. Did you read the description?
Let me go back up to it.
Let's read the description of what that means. Because you and I know that heraldry always has meaning. So let's read what this one means. Perhaps you wondered what it all meant. Perhaps you examined it curiously and asked the significance of the arrows, the castle wall, and the flaming sun. Since, in a sense, you have served with the 22nd, it's right that you should know its history. The shield is a symbol and it tells the story of past achievements. The 5 arrows are 5 Indian campaigns fought by the regiment soon after it was organized in 1865. They tell of pioneer days, far west, uprisings, massacres, and deadly ambushes. The castle wall stands for the fortifications of Santiago, another place where we went and conquered people. It is a reminder that when the war is declared with Spain in 1896, men of the 22nd were the first American troops on Cuban soil. And we went in there and thwarted all of the patriots who had been fighting for over 2 decades for their independence from Spain and murdered a bunch of them so that we could dominate the island.
I know this is unrelated, but I always go with my gut. And as soon as, because to be honest, I didn't even catch the castle wall the first time I looked at it. I was just focused on the arrows and the sun. And then when you did bring my attention to it, the first thing I thought, you know, I got to go there, you guys, the Q posts involving the 2 castles. And I just, you know, for those brilliant anons, I know you guys are in the chat. Let me know if you can find a correlation or a theory off of this and the castles that are mentioned in Q. And with that, I'll get back to you, Colonel. Just something, this little spidey sense went off.
Okay, so the sun is the flaming sun of an emblem in the Katapuna, which is a Philippine secret society which started the insurrection against the United States and symbolizes the part of the regiment that played in its pacification. So that sun represents us killing Filipinos. So the castle wall is us killing Cubans, and the sun is us killing Philippines and colonizing them under the United States of America.
And 22nd letter of the alphabet is V. Those that are wondering, you know, it's the 22nd infantry, so the V infantry. Just putting it out there.
So, And then it goes on to say these are a few of the achievements of the 22nd Infantry. And it's interesting to know the first act of the United States against Germany, get this, was the seizing of crews of the German ship in Hoboken, New Jersey, with a detailed dispatch from the 22nd Infantry. So we went and captured Germans who had been in the port of the United States in Hoboken, New Jersey, as the first official act of the United States against Germany in World War I. Not as an idle boast, but in the commemoration of services well performed, the motto was deeds, not words. And those are definitely some deeds, but I would argue not great deeds at all. So
I'm still just rocked because I think you found the beginning of Gladio, Colonel. Like, I'm serious.
I am
what
too.
this looks like.
Yeah. And
I feel you just went full Pulp Fiction on us, Colonel. Like, we were here, now we're over here, now we're to the beginning of the movie. It's just like, holy smokes.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if the audience is tripping or if they understand the magnitude of what you're bringing to us, but I know I get it. So,
yeah.
Holy smokes.
Right. And again, I have often wondered whether or not it seemed odd to me that the entire impetus for this would have came out of the UK and only for us after World War II, especially when you look at how the OSS was found. And so let's talk about that just for a second. So if you look at the main players of OSS, you have Paul Helliwell, a big attorney, banker. You have Wild Bill Donovan. We talked about Wild Bill Donovan. Wild Bill Donovan married into an elite Buffalo family that was in the top 5 richest families in the entire United States at the time, like in the 1940s. Her family owned 42% of downtown Buffalo. They owned railroads. They owned the railroad depot and we brought that up when we did that one show of that magnificent, wonderful train depot that they had built. It looks like Union Station in Washington, D.C. It's an amazing thing. And there, by the way, we went in it this past summer and they're renovating it. We didn't go in it. We went to the train depot and just looked at it from the outside. But they have a fundraising effort that they're basically going to renovate it and restore it and open it up as a museum. And so the riches, so you have to scratch your head and you're like, what was in it for them? Why did all of these people, and they weren't in the military, they were in the office, the OSS, not in the military. You know, you've got some glorification, uniforms, blah, 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 history, all that crap. These guys were secret spies, some of which people never even knew they were doing what they were doing. What was in it for them? Why did they leave these plush? Because in my observations, they knew going into war, because go back to the Fabian Society. They said at the onset there would be 3 wars, and at the end of the 3rd one, it would be one world government. So this was done in the late 1800s. They told you exactly how they were going to go about doing it. So if you know that after World War I, they were already planning World War II, and in order to go into World War II and have it shaped the way you wanted the outcome to be, you had to pre-plan it to be what you wanted it to be. And so you have the people that are actually pulling the strings as the international syndicate, the Bill Donovans of the world, the elite, rich people under the guise of the OSS pulling strings. We all thought World War II was about the generals, the, Pattons and Eisenhowers and all of them. It wasn't about them at all. Those guys were puppets in a play that was orchestrated and manufactured by OSS. And so these guys of the international syndicate representatives are the ones in the aftermath that set up the World Bank. They set up, in the interim between World War I and World War II, they set up the Bank of International Settlements, which is the central bank of central banks. Then after World War II, they set up the UN, all of these world governments, NATO, not world governments, world governmental organizations. And you could not have done that if you hadn't had the OSS pulling all of the strings, because who got all of the Nazis off from Nuremberg? The OSS. They hid them in camps. They helped with the rat lines to South America. And what did they do with all of those Nazis? Oh, they embedded them in CIA operations, and the OSS turned into CIA. So it makes perfect sense that if you are going to have the OSS, that there has to be a precursor to it. This is the precursor. This was set up a few years before we ever even went to World War I. I'm just dumbfounded by it. And I've been sitting on this for like 5 freaking days to wait to your show.
You're creating lineages of spies.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, think about everything they infiltrated from this.
Yeah.
I mean, we see, governors of this country, the bankers, everything.
Yes. And they're all here training. Let's see here. All right. So 1st Battalion, 22nd Infantry, they have, let's see, those are all of their little, they have killed in action listings for like A Company during the Indian, what the hell? Oh, this is even prior to that. So let's go down to the war with Spain, the Filipino insurrection. So this is Moro Wars. This is listing all of the different engagements that these people had been involved with. And what's interesting is you'll recognize some of these people's last names. This manual, I want people to go through it. I want people to look at all of the different links in here, because I think there's a lot, I want to say hiding in here. I think there's a lot of information that will be relevant to the whole Gladio. And here's some other stuff. Leavenworth, of course, we've all heard of that. Major Leavenworth was part of this organization. It's just crazy to me, the people that are affiliated with this, especially at the senior level. These are Colonel Caffey, Ryther, Ryther. These are all people that I've read about in a lot of different, historical context. And I had no idea they were all affiliated with this single unit.
Full-blown rifle ranges.
Huh?
A full-blown rifle range.
Yeah.
I'm just.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually very interesting. That how did all of these people end up being associated with this one single unit? Oh, and they also have the bases during the different years, and the years we would be now. Obviously, this organization, the 22nd Infantry, lasted a lot longer just than the period that it was in charge of the citizen military things. So you have to isolate the time that citizen military thing was in existence, which was, a little after 1900, and then all the way through to post World War I that we know of. And you start looking at these, Fort Benning, Georgia. Oh, you mean that's where they moved the schools of America? It just starts all adding up. Fort Sam Houston in 1910. And then let me show you what else I found at Fort Sam Houston. Out of Fort Sam Houston, they have responsibility for a place called Leon Springs Military Reservation. What goes on at Fort Springs Military Reservation? It's 32,000 acres northwest of San Antonio. It also has went by the name of Camp Stanley or Fort Stanley. If you start, and it's part of Camp Bolus, Civilian Conservation Corps, which is where all of this started, right? So it's associated with that. So if you pull that up, you find out that is in the United States, one of two largest CIA ammunition storage facilities in the United States. The only one that has more is in Virginia, just outside of Langley. So I was like, what? Yeah. And they said that shipments from this facility during the Iran-Contra, where we were illegally sending arms to the Contras, was shipped out of this facility, trucked over to Kelly Air Force Base, and flown out of Kelly in big, heavy aircraft down to Costa Rica and Guatemala. And I was like, wait a minute. So we've got all of this coming together. We've got Camp Bolus, part of the 1930s, and after this whole civilian or military thing that also dovetailed into the Civilian Conservation Corps under the tutelage of Teddy Roosevelt, because he was the big conservation guy. So he kind of embraced all of that. You've got the Civilian Conservation Corps sitting alongside the civilian military training camp, all basically under the same umbrella. And then when I'm searching for this civilian military training center, I come up with, oh gosh, well, that Army base happened to be one of those training facilities, and it also happened to be one of the CIA's largest weapons depots, only second to the one in Virginia outside of their headquarters. And then I got to thinking, one of the things that we found when we were doing South America is there's a place called Los Fresnos that's down on the Texas border, right near Brownsville. So very convenient if you wanted to smuggle something out of the government or out of the country, like right at Brownsville. Los Fresnos comes up all the time in the School of Americas. So all of those guys all of those dictators, terrorists, kidnappers, torturers that we sent to Schools of America down on the Panama base, when we wanted the elite of those graduates to learn how to do explosives, we trucked them up to Los Fresnos. That was an abandoned military base, and we taught them how to blow shit up.
Yes. It's funny you say that, because I typed in Los Fresnos and then I added CIA, and look at what article pops up. Secret U.S. Bomb School exposed, September 25th, 2007.
Yes. Yeah. We were bringing terrorists inside the United States via the CIA, and we were training them how to blow shit up. Not disarm bombs, to make bombs.
Bad news. So bad news. I want to say who, but it's just CIA is everything. I think this brings us one step closer to a direction I know one day we're going to find. I know everybody says, Alpha, just let it go. But I just can't. Is when you look at the old folk tale of the Khazarians, and they spread out through the whole world. And the mission plan was you will infiltrate every institution and we will take over the entire world. And it I just feel like this just gets us closer to figuring that out, especially with the understanding of how complex and how big at scale Operation Gladio is. To see here, like the actual, implementation phase. Like you took all these people from these different sectors and these different networking, and now you're seeing it unfold, or the way it looked as it unfold. I mean, just the names we talked about tonight. If you go back to that time period and you start looking at that networking, I think we really see how far this grows. You really see, who are the wives, who are the children, who are the, like, it just is what it feels like. I guess the best way to describe it, it's like when I was working a gang case and I'm working on figuring out, who's the guy calling the shots.
Yes.
And then as I'm pursuing that information, I find a letter and I'm like, why is this person always writing this person? And then it's like, oh smokes, this is the guy I've been looking here, and this has been the guy. Yeah. And then all of a sudden that opens up all these other connections. And I mean, that's really what tonight feels like.
Yeah.
Like, holy smoke.
Yeah, that's exactly what it felt like to me. That was like, I finally had went back as far as I need to go back to come forward. Because now I've got the basis for where it started in the United States and who started it. And the fact that I started this entire journey with Anthony Sutton's book about the Bolshevik, the New York Wall Street crowd funding the Bolshevik Revolution, the Hitler Revolution, and the FDR presidency. All of it gave birth out of 120 Broadway. I mean, that was like our first show, right? That's where I started. I'm right back there. Right?
Full circle.
So we started with the Bolshevik Revolution, which happened like around just after 1905. That's the exact time frame here, right? And it started with a Roosevelt, and I'm back to Teddy Roosevelt, which preceded FDR, but same family.
But that full circle also shows that you must be accurate.
Correct. Yeah, I went right around and came back right where I started. It's the same time frame. And to me, the most devastating part of all of this is it shows pre-knowledge of World War I.
And II.
Definitely, but World War I, from the perspective of them 3 years before World War I, they're training people for going to war as civilians. Come on.
And that many.
Who does that out of the middle of, yeah. Just in time.
Just like you don't dump stock on a certain president's company the day before an attempted assassinations on them.
Yeah.
And then go on news and say, It was an error. Look at our paperwork. We did paperwork. It's an error. Don't be surprised if they're tied into it. It's just.
Well, and we're going to talk about that on Friday too, since we're back to that, because Warhamster is a reformed Wall Street banker, and he's going to be on the show. So he's going to tell us about how those errors don't happen.
Oh, I can't wait to hear that. As you drink your wine, do you want I couldn't pass it up. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was just too good. It was too good. You set me up the perfect pitch on that one, Colonel. Do you want to let everybody know about Friday so they can start marking on their calendars and make sure that they watch?
Friday at 4:00, we are going to have Alpha, me, Warhamster, CanCon, Brian Cates, possibly Brian Gamble, all talking about what we know at that point on the attempted assassination of President Trump. And at 9:00 that morning, Warhamster and I are going to do a spaces with a constitutional scholar and explain to people, number one, what an anchor baby is, and number two, whether or not Kamala Harris is eligible to be president.
That's
So that's 9:00. And then at 4:00, now you give your news.
Well, at 4:00, you guys can catch me. It is 4:00, right? We got the time right on that one. You guys will catch me on InfoWars. They heard me doing an analysis late last night, and they said, "Hey, we want you to come and tell that analysis to our audience because we're not hearing anybody talk about that." So yes, you guys will catch me on InfoWars on Friday. Short show, and then after that, I'll be right back into the mix with our group for Friday. Yeah, I'm pretty stoked. I'm pretty stoked. I mean, I love conspiracy, so when you get to come out on InfoWars, it's just like, yes.
And my only request is at least once you have to mention Operation Gladio.
100%. 100%. I'm definitely going to get that in there. There was a good question in here. I'm trying to look for it so I can read it verbatim. If not, here it is. This comes from Plants Heal. Where do we go from here? They aren't just going to give up power. I think it's a fair question. It's a good question.
Well, I don't think they have a choice, because what has happened in the last 6-7 years with the Saudi Arabian sword dance, the meeting with Xi in the Forbidden Garden, clip, clip, clip. They're nothing without their money. And their funding source, Saudi Arabia was one of the major funding sources for all of this. You have to be able to launder money in order to make this operation work. And Saudi Arabia, through multiple of, the petrodollar, and which just expired, and all of the different mechanisms. So I don't know how much the audience knows, so I'll just say real quickly. After the Bushes, George Bush Sr. got out of office, he created a thing called the Carlyle Group. And the Jim Bakers and all of those people that had been hangers on, Dick Cheney, all those people. What they did with the Carlyle Group is it was a private equity fund that went and bought major stock holdings in all of the military industrial complex. So it in and of itself was like this big military industrial ball of wax. After they got all of the stocks of all of the military industrial complex embedded in the Carlyle Group, they sold a big chunk of like 20 to 25% initially. I don't know where it ended up to the Saudi royal family. 9/11 happens, and all of the money being funneled to Saudi Arabia from us, not the Carlyle Group, to buy weapons in the military industrial complex, paying dividends to the Carlyle Group and right back to the Saudis. So they were taking our tax dollars, buying weaponry for this entire war on terror that didn't exist. And they money laundered trillions of our dollars right back to themselves.
Just like they're doing with the border money.
Ukraine, they do
Israel.
it with. So that, when they arrested those 40-some princes and basically disassembled the corrupt elements of the Saudi government, and MBS took over, those strings got cut. It's my impression that same thing happened in North Korea, because North Korea basically was a vassal state of the CIA. The same thing with China, and the same thing with Russia. Not that they were vassal states, but that they were under the, like, I don't know how much your audience knows about the whole Russia with the Jewish oligarchs that were still in Russia. Ghost of, that's the other guy that's going to be on Friday at 4. Ghost of Base Patrick Henry is going to be.
Gordon.
Yeah. So he did an excellent post, I believe, this morning that talked about the coexistence of things that should be mutually exclusive, which is the Jewish element and the Nazi element sitting side by side in Ukraine, with people like Ihor Kolomoisky hiring the Azov battalions for security to launch and assassinate all the mayors that are ethnic Russians. Those things should not work in the same. And he does a great job of explaining the history of that in the post that he made this morning. And so all of that comes to play. So I think the answer to that is there has been a lot done behind the scenes that most people are not cognitive of.
I agree completely. And the only real thing, I'm actually going to add something, and then I'm going to do a call to action because I haven't done a call to action in a while. And I think you're really going to like this one too when I get there, Colonel. What I'll say is, I know a lot of times, especially when we have the conversations surrounding Q, people say, well, this was said and it didn't happen. Well, that's kind of the goal, to make sure those things don't happen. So I think, like, when this kind of information gets out there, especially in mass, I think we're doing our part, forcing them to be like, we just got exposed here. We got to adjust our plans. And then when they got to adjust their plans, you have investigators at that level, minds like mine times 1,000, that are waiting for that adjustment. They're waiting for us, the people, to do this massive amount of information that forces them to move, because they're sitting there being like, okay. And then when the move is made, they know who it is. And we've probably missed so many close calls by people just sharing the truth that we may never know. And that's okay, because preservation of life is always better than disclosure. And so I just want people to think about that. So with that, here's the call to action that I have for you guys. And I just ask, let's just do it for a week. Let's do it for a week until next Wednesday and see how this plays out. So whether you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, surprised those two channels haven't taken this down. It's pretty freaking impressive. Somebody's asleep at the wheel over there at Facebook, or X, or Rumble, Truth, Getter, whatever, on all the platform, on every single platform you are. This is my call to action for the tens of thousands of people that are going to see this video. Every social media post you put, even if it's just like, oh man, had a great day, went with the kids to go play soccer. At the end of the post, put hashtag Operation Gladio. Every single post you do, even if it's unrelated, let's flood the digital realm with hashtag Operation Gladio. And if you if you're like, well, I could do that, Alpha, that's easy. Then the next thing is go to Truth Social, and every post that Dan Scavino's done and every post that Trump's done, go in there and just comment hashtag Operation Gladio. My call to action for everybody is, from this Wednesday to next Wednesday, let's blast hashtag Operation Gladio, and let's just see what happens.
So it's already pre-formatted on X. I've noticed that. I've typed it so much that for like the first 500 times I typed it, it wouldn't pre-populate. Now I can type Operation and get the G out, and Gladio pre-populates. So I've already done most of the work for you. Do it. Let's do it.
I'm telling you, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. And
Because tell him what happened with the guy that you said that you knew that Liza did it with last night.
so Viva Fry, he
Yeah.
sees this thing, and so he taps into it and he asks the question, what's Operation Gladio? That's the most important question. That's it. Because now they're either going to click the hashtag, which is going to populate, this show, Colonel Show,
Colonel
other
Towner,
shows,
Colonel
video-
Towner, Colonel Towner.
yes, or they're going to go to the internet and what is this? It creates conversation, and I mean, curiosity killed the cat. Curiosity is going to save a country. That's what I'm thinking is going to happen. And I'm just saying, let's just see what happens. I mean, who know? You know what? Here's another one, you guys. I'm gonna just make a list. Go hit up Dan Scavino, put it on his comments. Go hit up Donald Trump, put it on his comments. Go hit up Don Jr., put it on his comments. Go hit up Joe Rogan, put it on his comments, and go hit up Tucker Carlson and flood their comments. Flood it. Even if it just makes people say, like, I just, I want to be along. Let me just put this in because everybody else is doing it. That's okay. Let's just get everybody to do it. And next Wednesday, I don't know, we'll come here and we'll just see what happens. Like, I'm pumped up.
That's awesome. I think that's fabulous. And it just makes sense right now. We just saw it play out in real time.
And that's the other thing too. There's a lot of questions surrounding who did it, who's behind President Trump's assassination. Yeah, we just saw, Kimberly Cheeto, who resigned to just delay a cover up. You saw today, Christopher Wray, all these people lying. There is a thirst for the truth. So if people just see this hashtag that's blowing up and people just start looking at it, this can really be something, you guys. Like this can really be something. And I'm
you can be part of it.
And 100%. I mean,
let's
just
change history.
100%. I'm telling you, long after we're gone, but we'll be looking from high above. Our great grandchildren are going to read their history book. It's going to say Operation Gladio. And they're just going to read how that there was a generation of patriots all over the world that said, we're going to expose the truth. We're going to take on the governments. We're going to take on the medical industrial complex, the military industrial complex, the deep state, the international crime syndicate, Alphas, Khazarians. Like, they took on everything in the face of cancel culture, in the face of threats to their jobs, in the face of ridicule through their family. There were Americans that were brave enough to just be digital soldiers. I'm pumped.
Amen.
All right, let's get these Rumble rants. And then after that, I have a video to close out on that I think is very appropriate for this show. And I haven't seen it in quite some time, but I think people enjoy it. So let me scroll down. So once again, Chica Boom, thank you for becoming a monthly supporter. I appreciate that. $2 Rumble rant from Rick Lowe 100. Wait a minute. The French made the first attempt to build a canal in Panama?
Not the French. So let me clarify. It was the United States, but the French owned the land. And they were trying, it's like selling swampland in Florida. They were trying to offload the land, and they hired Sullivan and Cromwell to sell it to someone in the United States for a commission, and they sold it to the United States government, but they had to indict the Nicaraguan canal and get it canceled first.
You guys are getting like you guys are getting $1,000 worth of like college lectures here from the Colonel, man. I hope you guys are sending her love. Rex 57, $10 Rumble rant. Thank you, Alpha and Colonel Towner, and Rex. Thank you and everybody else that's here being an audience for us to share this. And loyal of the loyals, Breadmaker 62, $50 Rumble rant. Very interesting information. Thank you both. Semper Fortis. Thank you, Breadmaker. And the last Rumble rant, $20 Rumble rant from this name is so cool. Every time this name pops up, I'm like, you're so damn creative. So it's S underscore and the word hole. So S hole. Keep on rocking, Alpha and Colonel. And man, just throw Rumble rants if you got a creative name, so I have an excuse to say a funny on the air. So Other than that, you guys have heard the show lined up for Friday with all of us. That'll be there for the Colonels. Link for the Colonels' social media and our Rumble channel down in the description below. Link to all the sponsors and affiliates down below. So I'm going to close this out with the video and instead of playing the ads from my sponsors. And they're like, come on, Alpha. So I asked that even though I'm not going to play those videos, just do me a favor when you guys have some downtime, go in the description, just visit some of these people that support me. Some very cool stuff, especially medical stuff. And like I said, Alpha's free, no NDAs. Nobody's got a leash on Alpha. And that enables me to bring on phenomenal guests like the Colonel. That's what allows me to let my guests drink wine live on podcasts. I'll just play. I saw some people in the audience. Alpha knows she's drinking wine. It's water, you guys. It's water. So with that, Colonel, any final words? And after that, I'm shooting this video that I think everybody will enjoy.
Let's go.
All right, you guys. First in, last out. Semper Fi. God bless. Make sure you guys go subscribe to the Colonel's channel and enjoy this video.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to amuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger public opinion. This means greater coverage and analysis of international news, for it is no longer far away and foreign, but close at hand and local. It means greater attention to improved understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.